So I'm going to briefly put some issues on the table and then follow the sequence. I'm going to ask the researchers to provide their perspectives on the bilateral trade and investment relationship, and then from each of the practitioners get one particular perspective on what it means to both sides of this relationship in terms of trade and investment opportunities and of course challenges as well. As we've been hearing in the inaugural, trade and investment is only one of several dimensions, but unquestionably a critical one. You can't have a healthy trade and investment relationship between two countries if the larger political and security context is not conducive, but at the same time it's unlikely that you're going to have too much emphasis on political and diplomatic issues if there isn't a significant opportunity for trade. So self-interest, economic interest, if you will, is very squarely part of any practical, any sustainable relationship. Now, in terms of opportunity, clearly both the subcontinent, if you will, or India specifically, and much of the African continent are at comparable levels of GDP. There are, I presume, at that level, or at that range of GDP per capita, consumption patterns typically tend to be similar. So in a sense, while the trade orientation of India has been westward, and Japan, our three key export markets, obviously are the US, the EU, and Japan. We're actually satisfying the needs of consumers in those countries who are very different from our own. To some extent, I think China is experiencing the difficulty of transiting from having developed a production system that caters to affluent consumers to now reorienting it to catering to their own consumers. And there's some overlap, but it's not very large. And I think when India starts to deal with slowdown in global trade as we're experiencing, let's not forget that the last 1 year has been disastrous for global trade, that it will start looking for consumers who are much closer to its own patterns of consumption. And clearly Africa becomes desired, I wouldn't call it target, but a market. And perhaps from the African perspective, while of course raw materials, energy and resources have been part of their export basket, India is going to be a very large consumer of this. Perhaps that will evolve into opportunities in manufacturing and so on. All of these suggest that the bilateral relationship can only increase. The volume can only increase, the range of products that will be traded can only increase. And one element which actually we not addressed in our book, which is a lacuna, is the whole issue of food security and the need for India to look beyond its borders to meet what will obviously be very large demand for products other than cereals, other than carbohydrates. And cultivation through contract or through other arrangements in other parts of the world really become an option. We can see China having moved quite far down that road with its arrangements in South America and so on. So there are a bunch of things. There's opportunity, there's constraint. Do we know how to do business with each other? What have been the successes and failures? What can we learn from these experiences that we've already had? And I think that's the set of issues which I expect this panel to address in one form or the other. So I'm going to ask Sani, Musa to start things off. Sani is a policy analyst with the Nigerian President's Office. And I presume you are here as part of the summit preparations. So, we start with you. I would request the panelists to confine themselves to this round to between 5 and 7 minutes. And once they've all spoken, I'll give them a chance to reinforce or to challenge points, and then we'll open it up. We have an hour and a half, so it's a very session that can accommodate a lot of questions and discussions. So, something with that, let me welcome you and ask you to start.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I wish to begin by thanking the ITSA for giving me the opportunity to come and be part of this very important conference. I've been asked to speak on trade and investment between Africa and India. And it is just natural for me to start with the African situation. Africa is a continent of paradox. A very rich, open, the richest continent with the poorest people. A continent that has 34 of the least developed countries, and yet we have 6 of the fastest growing economies in the world today, out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world today. A continent of very hard-working, vibrant people, but yet hampered with sometimes poor leadership and poor policies. Now, India is the 4th largest trading partner with Africa after Europe, US, and China. From less than $1 billion in 1999, today the trade volume between Africa and India is around or over $70 billion, and it may be more by the end of this year. With a total investment of more than $30 billion, India is also the 5th largest investor in Africa. The Indian investment is diversified, as only 43% is in the extractive sector, the rest being in telecoms, automobile, health, pharmaceuticals, and the rest. Even India's presence in the energy sector is based on simple demand and supply framework. That is why many have concluded that India and Africa have symbiotic and complementary economic relationship. African nations have also benefited to some extent from India's duty-free tariff preference, DFTP, for the least developed countries, which was started in 2008 and revised in August last year. However, due to lack of logistics and poor infrastructure, many African countries have not been able to take full advantage of the DFTP scheme offered by India. What is so encouraging, however, is that India-Africa partnership is widening and deepening. And Africa and India have a combined GDP of $3 trillion and a combined population of a little over 2.2 billion people, most of them very young ones. Thus, the combination of these two regions, or these two partners, will be difficult to be ignored by any power in the current global arena. And in the olden days, the power of the king or the kingdom was judged by the number of subjects he or she controls or the territories possessed. Today, however, the strength of any nation is measured in terms of its actual and potential economic power, as well as its scientific and technological advancement. In other words, production and knowledge. Considering these indices and looking at the current global scene today, one can simply conclude that it is characterized by a 3-tier economic architecture. That's the global economic situation. The advanced industrial powers of US, Europe, and Japan are at the top and are still the main driving forces of global policy making. This is followed by the original 4 BRIC countries. 2 of these are very resource rich, and the other 2 are manufacturing for the whole world. Then the third tier composed of the rest of the struggling developing countries. Given this scenario, and given the commonalities of interest, values, history, and similar contemporary challenges like terrorism and the rest, there is no better way for Africa and India than to come together and have a mutually beneficial relationship, economic, political, and otherwise. For the 2 regions, the greatest potential is in agriculture. And I'm happy so many people have been mentioning about food security since morning. About 60% of the African population is involved in agriculture. And about 50% of the Indian population is also involved in agriculture. So there is a basic commonality here. And of course, 60% of the unused arable land in the world today is in Africa. So there is no other sector that we have real potential than in agriculture. And agriculture has the potential of absorbing the young unemployed youth. The next is the energy sector. And I was just talking to some people during the lunch break now, that from Douala in Senegal, from Douala in Cameroon to Dakar in Senegal, is a total population of about 300 million people. We have only, at any given time right now, we have only 10,000 megawatts for 300 million people. And by 2050, that population will be 550 million. How can you run an economy, a modern economy, without energy? So, and it will reduce substantially the cost of production if there is power generation commensurate with the population and strength. Now, education, especially science and technology, for the youth to acquire the necessary skills for modern production is the next main area where, okay, of course, India has been doing a lot of capacity building for a lot of our people. We have 4,900 and something Nigerian students here in India, currently in the Indian university. So, but Nigeria alone is a population of about 170 million people. So that is very, very little and very, very limited. So there is a huge opportunity for expansion in education, especially in science and technology, of course. Then the next is this infrastructural development. Here, India already has some level of capacity that we want to be brought to Africa, because there is no single country in Africa, out of the 54 countries we have, that doesn't have infrastructural deficits. Of course, the environmental development, and this is also where India has a lot of this. I've been going around in the last couple of days here in this country, and I think, and I've traveled widely all over the world. This Delhi is maybe the greenest city I've ever been to. So we have a lot to learn from India in terms of managing our environment, especially with the current desertification, deforestation going on in Africa on a very, very rapid scale that is even scaring our governments. A lot of people have been talking about, thank you. A lot of people have been talking about the blue economy, and I'm very, very excited because biodiversity, sustainable fishery, and the rest is one area where also we will need a lot of partnership with India. And then, of course, the chair has just told me maybe I have 1 or 2 minutes more. So, in a nutshell, the relationship between India and Africa will continue to grow, will continue to rise, will continue to expand, will continue to deepen as the years come by. This is because we have the two regions have a lot of things that each other needs. We have complementary and supplementary economic relations that will be a very, very important basis for our development in the 21st century. Now, if we don't come together, then we will have what my people call the logic of the alligator. You know the alligator? That small animal that is more than lizard but less than the crocodile. So the alligator, if he sees cloud formation, it is about to rain, he will run away to go into the water to hide from rainfall. So that is, if you are doing illogic, we call it the logic of the alligator. So, and I hope we will not have the logic of the alligator. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
I'm really pleased to learn that you want to learn about urban environmental management from New Delhi. I think everybody in this room would have serious doubts about our ability to teach anybody anything, but it's good to know. Sudip, can I ask you to? Sudip Chaudhuri is a professor at IIM-Calcutta, and I had the pleasure of editing a book to which he contributed on the pharma industry. I don't know if you're going to talk about pharma, but clearly that is one dimension of the relationship between India and Africa. So it would rest in some very good points.
Yeah, thank you. I've been by thanking Dr. Subir, Gokarn, and also Dr. Chaturvedi for organizing this and inviting me. I have only 7 minutes, so I will be very brief. The simple premise, is which on the research which I have experienced is, if the last 50 years is any guide, then if the developing countries have to develop, they will have to help each other. They will use developed countries, but they cannot afford to be bigger enough. And too many developing countries just want to be passively reliant on the developed countries, and that doesn't work. So African countries and India need to collaborate. There are many areas where we need to learn in India from Africa, but one area where Africa perhaps can use our competences is farming, and that is what Subir mentioned, and I am saying Subir because it was because of that book about 1.5 years back that I got seriously involved in the farming industry. As you know, farming industry in India is one of the success stories. India is a major exporter, not only to developed countries like USA, where the standards are very high, but India is the most important, source of imports in Africa too. And I had an opportunity to do some work in few African countries, namely Ghana and Tanzania, where I did some research on pharma industry. And in these countries, their percentage of local production in the total demand has got stuck around 1/3. It's not going up. And if you see the reasons, one major reason is technology. Once upon a time, it was quite easy to produce manufactured pharmaceuticals. Standards were not high. India, many firms did not follow standards. In Africa, many firms did not follow standards. In fact, in Africa, there are stories how many Indian firms, without following proper standards, actually dumped not so good quality drugs in Africa. These are things of the past. Things have changed. Now everywhere you have now proper standards. India has done that. Both Ghana and Tanzania, for sure, I know they have done that. So they really have good standards. What does it mean? It means now if you have to produce, expand, you will have to have proper GMP compliant plants. You will set up. You have to run those plants. Not only that, if you want to manufacture a particular drug, you have to get the regulatory approval from the Drug Control Administration. You have to do a lot of bioequivalence and other studies, prepare dossiers, submit data, and then ultimately get approval. So you require technology. And that technology, is the problem in many countries in Africa. On the other hand, one thing we have is actually technology. India, has, and this technology is highly diffused. There are hundreds of firms in India who have the technology. There are thousands of technical persons in India, who have the technology. And what I feel very bad is, while India has this technology, and it is available, the link is not there, and Africa is unable to use it. What I find very strange is, many African countries, in fact I interviewed also some firms in Africa, when they want technology, the tendency is to go to USA and Europe. Doesn't make sense. It is so much costlier. You know, a typical American or European will charge fees, which is difficult to afford in USA, in Africa. But India has it. In fact, I was surprised when I last visited Mumbai, when I learned that China is doing this smart thing, which, see, China is ahead of us in many areas. One area we are ahead of China is in exporting finished drugs. And that is because we have really perfected this art of getting approvals from US. Because of different reasons. Let me not go into that. China cannot compete with us in that market. They can compete in target areas, in bulk drugs, etc. What they are doing, and it is such a fantasy strategy for them, they are very quietly coming to India and they are actually hiring Indian technical experts to China and solving the problem of technology. And there are Indians, who because of various reasons, there are both pull and push pressures, who want to leave their jobs, they want to go to a foreign country, and therefore that is working. So I think what I am going to propose here is, and this is one concrete area, typically in all these summit and seminars, we say a lot of big things and ultimately nothing happens. But if you really want to concretize, this is one concrete thing we can do. It's doable. It is doable and not only long term, but short term. And that is, trying to link the users of technology in Africa and the firms, etc. in India. And if that can be done, that would be a wonderful thing. I have applied in 6.5 minutes. Thanks so much.
Thank you for that very specific proposal, Sudip, and maybe in the Q&A we'll explore, she is a contributor to our book. She's written about the broad set of fronts on which Indo-African cooperation is possible. But I'd like her basically to give us a perspective from the development banking domain. How is Africa preparing for business and what sort of opportunities does that present high level for India to integrate more closely?
Thank you, Subir, and thank you for Brookings India for inviting me to this panel. As Subir mentioned, I spent about 6 years in the African Development Bank based in Tunisia, which I just returned to India a year ago. So I think just to highlight perhaps a couple of facts about India's cooperation in context with the African Development Bank, which is one of the largest financiers in Africa. There's also a particular fund called the African Development Fund, which finances the 40 low-income countries of Africa within its 54 countries. And in the last replenishment round for that, India was one of only 2 contributors within the global financial network to increase its contribution to this African Development Fund. So through a multilateral and pooled mechanism, India continues to be a supporter of Africa. Further, they had set up a trust fund. A trust fund was used within the bank's context to finance very specific studies, consultants, etc. So there was a cross-border initiative on learning more about mobile banking between the 2 regions, and that was funded by this trust fund. That was again about $10 million from the Indian government. And then finally, I think I have colleagues here from EXIM Bank. So there is a new initiative now to create a project development company to initiate new bankable projects. So this is between, I believe, the EXIM Bank of India, African Development Bank, and a UAE company to set up a sort of $50 million project development company. So these are just some highlights from my time at the African Development Bank. Right now, I'm at the Yes Institute within Yes Bank. So I'm sitting within a private sector capital provider. So the Yes Institute is all about bringing private capital into development. So what I wanted to say is the reason why trade and finance is important is it gets linked back to poverty. The World Bank data shows us that there's about 32 to 35%, around 400 million people in India still below the poverty line, and about 47% in Africa. So together about 900 million people in this region are below the poverty line. And the economic growth and trade and investments are the main mechanism to uplift this situation. So between 1999 to 2010, 17% of this population of extreme poverty rose out of that status in India, and 10% of that same occurrence happened in Africa. And that was because of the relative high growth rates, both in India, an average of 7.4% over the last 10 years, and about 5.7% in Africa. So now the point being poverty, which needs economic growth, which needs trade and investment. So trade and investment, India and Africa are targeting to reach 160 billion by 2020 from the current figures. So the relationship between the two are based on this shared future, on natural resources, similar demographics, and large domestic markets. And what is needed to make this happen, this 160 billion, is increased market access, availability to trade finance, simplification of bilateral processes, and tax regimes. So I have a lot of figures on the trade, but I'll be happy to just move on to some of the areas of cooperation. And I believe this third summit that's coming up will reflect some of Prime Minister Modi's emphasis on the speed, skill and scale between the two regions. I think this is poised to be a great forthcoming summit. And currently, India has about 8.5 billion in lines of credit extended to Africa. In the summit, it's expected the Prime Minister Modi will announce further multi-billion-dollar development package and the establishment of about 100 training institutes in Africa in areas ranging from agriculture to rural development, food processing, ICT, vocational training, English language, and entrepreneurship. So 5 specific areas I feel where there can be greater cooperation. One is on the area of healthcare, where Indian healthcare is poised to cater to 4.9 million medical tourists by 2025, of which 55% are estimated to come from Africa and West Asia. Further on ICT, ICT from India can play a great role in even Africa's Strategy 2063, which is all about building a knowledge economy in Africa. Thirdly, hydrocarbons. When Africa has the potential to become India's biggest source of hydrocarbons, from which we can secure 50% of our imports in the future. The renewable energy cooperation, where given the current emphasis on renewable energy in India, we can partner to help Africa develop its aim of about 170 gigawatts of renewable energy. Lastly, defense and maritime security. With the seas between us, which cater to about 30% of global trade, I think it's important that both come together to secure this sea route. So I'd like to say that the true potential of this shared belief with multicultural societies, entrepreneurship and innovation will lead to the economic and development aims that we hope to achieve. Thank you.
I'm going to turn to T.C.A. Ranganathan next. He was till a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago, chairman of EXIM Bank, which is clearly a central nodal institution in the relationship between India and other countries in Africa. And just share his experiences in how the Indian national sector has facilitated the growth in the relationship and what sort of challenges were faced, and how does this, or what does this portend for the future?
I have been associated with Africa for the last 8 years. I was in State Bank of India heading the overseas operations. And I was on some 9 boards there and some branches overseeing there in Africa. Then with EXIM Bank. Indian engagement with Africa has grown exponentially in the last 8-10 years. Almost 7 times. The trade has gone up by 7 times, exports have gone up by 6 times, imports by 9 times. And the endeavor of EXIM Bank has been to promote Indian investment and trade, and to at the same time counsel and guide Indian exporters and investors that if they want to go to Africa, they must go systematically and sensibly. And what I keep telling them, and not what I'm trying to represent them, if you see Africa as a concept, it's 10 times bigger than India, it's got a GDP also which is 10% higher than India. On the population which is 10% lower than India. So the average per capita GDP in Africa is about 20 to 25% higher than in India. What is different is, because of the geography, the per capita land GDP is lower and inequalities are very high. The Gini's are 46% and also the distribution of GDPs in North Africa and South Africa, East, West, middle part of Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa has got a lower share. So because of high inequalities and size of continent, people get mistaken when going into Africa. And people forget that actually in Africa, the quality perceptions are not that of a low-income area. Across Africa, the quality standards are very high. A lot of Indian consumer companies have not been able to get headway there because they have been unable to meet up to the quality perceptions. If you see our exports to Africa, it has grown 6-fold. And we pride ourselves in being a major exporter to Africa. But 1/3 of our exports is petroleum products. We import petroleum from there, we sell petroleum to them. So it's, and that thing is very concentrated. Next biggest item is vehicles, and Indian motor vehicles are undoubtedly doing very well worldwide. And because they are doing well worldwide and they are being exported all over the world, they can be exported to Africa. The next item, as the speaker from IIM said, is pharma. There again, we are a leader internationally, so it can be sold in Africa. But in other products, our market share is very low. Country by country, if you see, our shares are very low. Even if you see the geographical distribution of Indian exports, bulk of exports go to South Africa as a country, and Kenya as a country, and then it's not dispersed out. Because Indian exporters tend to think Africa as one word, Africa, forgetting that it is 10 times the size of India, and 10 times the size of India means entire US, entire China, entire India, plus entire Western Europe and entire Eastern Europe can come in there and leave space for Mexico and Portugal and Peru and other places. It's very big. And people go there and plan projects or plan things thinking that we can do well in Africa. In that size, if the population is only 1.1 billion people, then the per capita person on land is very low. So the volume which you have to, the things are different and the costing which is required is different. Urbanization level in Africa is far more than in India. India, urbanization is about 26%, there it is 35% or so. So the concentration in cities are, so when you see a country which has got higher urbanization index, higher inequality index, and a higher per capita GDP, the nature of products which needs to go in there has to meet up to quality standards which they are used to. And they are used to, with all due apologies to the IIM professor sir, they are used to American standards and European standards. And unless Indian companies come up to the standards, they will not exist. And I have been counseling everyone on this. Project management also, it's an Indian skill folk, and we are extremely good in project management. But project management also, if you see the project specifications and you see the quality standards, and Preeti is from Africa Development Bank, they're extremely rigid and extremely high quality standards. If you see the road quality construction, the speaker had talked about the petroleum deficiency in a lot of West African countries. Senegal is one country which is a very low income country. absolute scarcity of foreign exchange, and very low per capita income. I have driven in Senegal for over 180 to 200 kilometers on non-tarmac roads at speeds of excess of 110 kilometers per hour without feeling any bump and without feeling any rattling of the car, because the unpaved road has been compacted so well that it drives just like a normal road. That is the quality which they look for and which is the quality they inspect. I have seen Indian companies being penalized for faulty execution because they have cut short on some small quality thing. It will work. It doesn't work in Africa. So if you want to work in Africa, if India wants the engagement to strengthen and improve, we have to be very clear on what we are trying for. We are trying to make better ties with an area which wants high quality, which is used to high quality. We cannot give shoddy quality. And we must be aware that we are not trying to do them a favor by going there. They will allow us in, or they will allow Indian companies in only if the Indian companies meet up to standards. India has a lot to offer. And I am working with UNDP and DFID on a project to promote Indian trade and investment with East Africa. And we are trying to promote a number of Indian companies to go there. Because the potential for manufacturing in Africa is immense. The growth rates in Africa is very high. Average African growth rate today is about 4%, but East Africa is growing at about 6.5%. The number of countries is growing at 7%. We get misled by what is Africa. And I would like to conclude by saying that India needs to understand that each African country is different, each African country is important, and each African country has expectations which are not that you can come and do a favor to us, but come and do business on our terms. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have learnings for environmental management, and we have learnings for non-tarmac roads. I mean, that's quite a story. But on our tarmac roads, we can barely do 10 kilometers around for the most part. Ambuj Chaturvedi is the Executive Director of the Overseas Infrastructure Alliance, an Indian company that has been doing business in Africa for 20 years now, 15, 20 years, 10 years, and in a number of countries, from what I remember, about 20 countries.
About 9 countries.
9, well, that's quite a lot. So, you've been talking about, in our conversations, about your experience in doing business, challenges, and how you dealt with them. I think that's a really important part of this overall trade and business perspective. So we're glad to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gokarn. And thank you for the panelists for this well-rounded summary of the India-Africa trade potential. I don't know how much more I can add to that in terms of statistics. I've been involved in a few of the discussions which are centered around the India-Africa Forum Summit in the past few days, and I just had a few observations, I think, related to that. Obviously, that the awareness is a lot more about Africa in India, which was certainly not there 10 years ago. Everyone just spoke about South Africa or Kenya for that matter. So this is a real refreshing change that whenever we're talking to people, we're talking about which countries in Africa am I working in, or we're getting to the specifics. And if I could, I would have asked for a show of hands in this room. After all that we've heard about Africa in all our discussions, you would realize that it's very similar to India. In terms of its complexities and diversity, inequality, so the challenges are very similar. So, although these discussions are good to come up with new solutions, but a lot of the solutions all of us already know that Africa has to work on improving its ease of doing business the way India is working on it, because those are some of the areas which really give the boost which is needed for trade and investment. State intervention has to reduce in the private sector activities. The governments have to reduce their involvement when we are working on the ground over there. So these are just some of the things, but I was obviously preparing a lot also before coming over here. And one of the only things which I can add to our panel discussion right now is Africa wants investment. That's the biggest thing. The last 10 years of history. Africa wants investment. Investments need infrastructure. My company, why we build infrastructure, that's why I'm looking at that point of view. Investments need infrastructure, and infrastructure will come from this one magic word which I have come across in the last 10 years. It was actually featured in one of the essays in the book as well. It's this word called PIDA, which I don't know, Preeti might tell you about. There's this PIDA program, which is a project for infrastructure development in Africa. This was a joint initiative of the World Economic Forum, African Union, African Development Bank, and NEPAD. Now, this program has listed down 20 large-scale, strategically important, crucial infrastructure projects across the continent of Africa. If we as a country, if at the summit, if we can figure out some room to work on these projects and get Indian companies involved, the implementation of any of these PIDA projects will have an immediate impact on the trade and investment opportunities, because these infrastructure projects will make sure that low-cost manufacturing can happen on Africa itself. Once the low-cost manufacturing starts, we will be able to have that diversified trade investment which we're looking for. Because today we're talking about oil and gas. Even no matter how much effort we put in increasing trade and investment, if you cannot have manufacturing in Africa, it will just, you will eventually in the long run create more resentment over there, because people will say that then no one is buying anything from us. And for us to have manufacturing in Africa, you need these PIDA projects to be implemented. So that's my only point, that if we can figure out some way to get India involved in these large-scale strategic infrastructure projects, I don't think funding is a problem, because if we apply ourselves and if we decide that we have to go for these projects, India can pick one or two large-scale of these infrastructure projects, and that can really serve as a booster to the trade and investment between the two continents. Continent and subcontinents. That's it.
I'm just going to ask each of you a question to sort of, elaborate or reinforce points that you made. So, Sani, let me start with you. You did talk about heterogeneity and homogeneity. You did talk about a sort of demographic and a consumer profile that is very common, very widespread. But how much of a common market is Africa? We of course know that there are multilateral institutions, SADC, and so on. But is there a convergence? Is there a movement towards a kind of common trading framework? Genuinely, that of course that makes it easier for a country like India to be dealing with a relatively standardized set of rules and so on, as opposed to dealing with individual countries. Is that issue at all? And what do we need to see happen there in terms of greater integration within the African continent itself?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me say that there is no single economic unit as far as Africa is concerned. It is a very heterogeneous and diverse region. Apart from the fact that in terms of differences in economic policies, there are also differences in the types of colonial rules we have gone through. There are the Anglophone, there are the Lusophone, which are the Portuguese-speaking countries, and then there are the Francophone, the French-speaking countries. We have gone through different colonial experiences, and we have different relationships with the various colonial powers. India has similar characteristics with the Anglophone because we were all under British colonial rule. We cannot say the same of the French. We cannot say the same of the Portuguese colonies. So what we are trying to do right now as a continent is to really strengthen the regional economic communities as building blocks of this. It may be in the future, but there is no uniformity right now. Thank you.
Sudip, you did talk about technology exchange as a sort of very important building block. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What sort of institutional capacity, what sort of institutional structure you visualize would facilitate this, would make this a meaningful concept?
See, if you see the history of industries in different countries, it has been a mix of indigenous efforts to develop technology and importing technology. And countries have imported technology in different ways. And one obvious channel, if you go to Africa or India, for example, India right now, the industries where we are not developed, such as telecom equipments or medical devices, we think, our strategy is to invite, foreign trade investment, as if, that is enough. That often is not enough. So you will have to have a strategic intervention to ensure that actually, the foreign technology is coming. One I see in Africa today is this, that in the generalist market, India is the most important exporter. And again, what I see is that, and I live with many Indian firms also, right now, they are not so keen to invest in Africa. This is another problem. There are some important case studies, like Sigla in Uganda, like your Kadila in Ethiopia. So there are cases where they have come there. But I think what, the chief of Kadila, if I remember correctly, said in one of the meetings in Africa is this, that very often their investment there is much more socially motivated. It is not a commercial investment. And if it is socially motivated, beyond the point we cannot sustain. Okay, and therefore if you really want the Indian firms to go there, and very frankly, Indian firms, if they go there and help the industry develop, that actually would be a clear case of Africa developing. But my assessment is this, right now Indian firms are not yet ready to do that. But they have the technology. And therefore my point is this, and the technology from the firms. So there is technology available. And you see in pharma, the technology is embodied in the person. A person knows, if you hire a technical person from India, he can advise the African firm to set up the plant, to run the plant, to submit dossiers for regulatory approvals. So therefore the key is what? To use those resources. And what I again see, to repeat what I said, but elaborate, see, in fact, I asked many of the African firms, at least in 2 countries I did interviews, that what's the problem, why don't you? They just say we do not know whom to contact. It may appear odd, and therefore what they do, they go through many of these, European development institutions. Like in Africa, the German organizations actually do a very remarkable job. They are highly involved and they spend a lot. But typically in those cases, the experts come from Europe. They are not going to pay money for experts to come from India. Okay, and therefore, that becomes much more costly, and you cannot really use many of them. So my suggestion is very simple. And I think some of the journalists said that in many of the African countries, situation is similar. There are Indians who are willing to go there. Okay, but again, a particular say, an Indian working in a particular Indian company may not be satisfied, may not be looking for opportunities, but he doesn't know where to go, whom to go. Similarly, there are users, there are firms in Africa who want to use, but they do not know. And therefore, I think what we should do is to think of some institutional elements where the two can meet. And I have some ideas, but that is maybe too early to do that. But here, what I am really flagging is the feasibility and the desirability of person-based technology transfer. That is reality, and that can work actually.
Preeti, you talked about potential for cooperation on development front. You mentioned health and so on as areas where great opportunities exist. But the issue may seem a little related to the point that Sani was addressing, which is there the possibility of an Africa focused as opposed to an individual country focused platform. And particularly does the African Development Bank play some sort of unifying or synthesizing role in this development domain? And commerce, maybe it is not, it can facilitate to a point, but that's not its primary objective. But the issues you mentioned clearly have to have some, facilitator, some sort of intermediary that spans the region, at least part of the continent, if not all of it. So is that an option, is that a role that the African Development Bank can play, and what should India's engagement with the institution be?
I think it's a role that the bank is playing already in that context. Its mandate is to finance in all 54 countries of Africa. India and the shareholding of the African Development Bank is 60% African, 40% non-regional. So India is part of that non-regional bloc. So I think in the past, the Indian administration has dealt with the African Union also as one centralizing body that can set policies for the continent. However, I feel that while these multilateral channels continue, there is no harm in even dealing with the regional blocs, so the COMESA, the SADC, and as are the Dean of the Ambassadors from Ethiopia. So there are also linkages happening between the countries. So there's a big flower and agricultural endeavor that's going on in Ethiopia with an Indian entrepreneur. So I think it's a multifaceted approach. However, that concept of an India-Africa fund, a fund where we both could contribute to it, which would then help development, is that would be a very interesting concept. There was a mention in some earlier discussions that there's a lack of a financial framework where a contribution can be made into an India-Africa fund. Thank you.
Mr. Ranganathan, you highlighted the very substantial differences in market conditions. You talked about population density and so on, which are quite challenging for companies that have not operated in similar environments. It's not an automatic transfer of product and so on, which of course many multinationals who have tried to sell into India have also faced. They come with a product that they've developed for their own domestic base, and it flops miserably because it doesn't satisfy conditions. So what do institutions like the EXIM Bank and so on have? Is this a deal breaker in a sense? Are these hurdles going to be insurmountable for many or most Indian companies, or is the opportunity large enough and attractive enough to sort of justify some sort of public or a quasi-public effort? The Export Promotion Councils and so on, the EXIM Bank, all of that infrastructure playing a much more active and strategic role in this process.
Well, it's not a deal breaker, but there is a major project which is being launched by the help of DFID and UNDP called T.C.A, supporting Indian trade and investment in Africa, where they are trying to build up profiles in the first phase in order to marry Indian businessmen and African opportunities and create joint ventures between African companies and Indian companies, focusing on East Africa as a concept first. If a business opportunity has to be done, it has to be done in a viable manner, in a successful manner, and various risks associated with doing business have to be captured. So that effort of capturing and doing for this study, in absence of that study, on a generic basis, a number of Indian companies have done well, who have done their homework properly and gone about it systematically. But a number of Indian companies have also not done well, because what happens is, you see Africa potential, but the per capita density per square kilometer of land is different in different parts of Africa. You get to act wrong, you can make mistakes. And production depends on volumes, it depends on scale, it depends on cost of production. Per capita costs of labor, for example, in a number of African countries is higher than in India. The per capita GDP is higher. If you forget that per capita GDP in a number of African countries, including Nigeria, is higher than that of India, you will end up in a costing error or you go with a technology which cannot be done in that. So you need to manage the technological level, manage the scale level with the country. And that exercise we are doing in a structured manner right now, so that will take some time to roll out. EXIM Bank has been supporting projects and investments by Indian companies. And we have supported a number of Indian companies who have gone there. And they have gone for a variety of projects from textiles to steel works to pharma to even in what you call instrumentation. But each case it has been by an entrepreneur who has studied the market well, has gone not to Africa but to a particular country with a particular idea. If a person goes to a particular country with a particular idea, after doing his homework, he can do well. If he goes to Africa as a concept, then he will not do well. Africa should not be the excellency that Ethiopian ambassador. This is a misconception we have in India calling Africa. It's not Africa. It is Ethiopia or Nigeria or Kenya or Zambia, and the dynamics of Zambia have to be known and to be understood by the person. And within those dynamics, what can work, what cannot work. That approach, number of Indian companies have succeeded. Without that approach, number of Indian companies have burned their fingers also.
So it's a mistake to look at the aggregate rather than the details. In some ways, also people coming to India look at the country as opposed to the state where they're. But is that a comparable differentiation?
No, it is. If you see in terms of potential and raw materials or natural wealth, the richest states in India are the eastern states of Orissa and Jharkhand and Bihar. And the amount of opportunity which is there, which is untapped opportunity in terms of infrastructure building or consumer products or education or health provision is the maximum. How many Indian companies are doing it?
It comes back to the under the ground wealth. Ambuj, you didn't. I actually want you to talk about two issues which relate to the point that Ranganathan made. You're in 9 countries, you said,
yes.
Which actually directly challenges his premise of country focus. What has the experience been in terms of doing business in different countries? Do you have a very country-specific strategy, or have you gone in with a kind of a regional strategy which has common elements across all countries and which seems to have worked? So that's the first question. I have another one afterwards.
I think both of you are right in that sense, because I'll tell you why. Because the 9 countries which I'm working in are very similar to each other. So Africa also is, the 54 countries are divided in groups. So you have the Group A, Group B, Group C. So so if you compare Ethiopia, Tanzania, Mozambique, Rwanda, Burkina Faso, Congo Brazzaville, these are the ones which I could enter into in an easier way. Obviously, when we started working, we had traveled across the continent in 40 countries. And it was after traveling across 40 countries, we realized that these were the 9 ones which we could enter into. So that's why I said that you both are right, because it required me to travel across the continent, do my research, figure out where I can enter, and only then I could successfully establish a foothold in the 9 countries where I'm working in 10 years down the line. And obviously, I was expanding a lot faster in the last 10 years. The next 10 years, I'll probably add maybe 1 or 2 more countries. And it has to be done in a very slow, systematic process way, to the extent that all the friends which I made in Delhi with the African High Commissioners here, they started getting angry at me. They're like, you've been saying you'll come to our country. But initially, we traveled everywhere. We were like, okay, there's an opportunity. But then, we learned it the hard way, that Africa is different across. Because initially we thought that, okay, 40 countries will be working. I scaled up my team, I had 40 people working for me. And now, 3 years down the line, I've had to reduce my team down to 3 people, shift most of them back to Bombay, so to my headquarters. So that's what's happened. That obviously, this process of 9 countries didn't start immediately. It took us 10 years to sort of realize that you have to take Africa one country at a time.
But the 9 you mentioned, they're not in one linguistic group as...
Not linguistic, but at least economic. Economically, they are very...
But then there are different legal frameworks and so on.
Yes.
Anglo, Franco,
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's the learning.
So you've actually had to develop different capabilities to...
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what has been your biggest source of satisfaction? What has been your biggest frustration? Source of frustration?
In terms of working across the continent, I don't know. The biggest source of satisfaction is that finally we found this realization has set in, and we have a country strategy in place now. Whenever we want to enter a new market, so that's the achievement. So now, initially, it would take us 5 visits to get a project and to open up a country and to start working with it. Now it takes us maximum 1 or 2 visits. Because we can find our feet on the ground in a much quicker way. We know the architecture.
And frustration?
Frustration is obviously, the difference which is there.
Okay.
The difference. And the size of the economy, if you leave Nigeria and Kenya and South Africa out of the equation, Egypt also, and North Africa, the size of the markets could be a lot, we would want it to be a lot bigger, because the minute you leave the capital city in any of these countries where I'm working, you can see what you see in the movies, you have like just barren lands, and the size of the market is not that big.
Okay. So I think it's time to open it up to the audience. Thank you very much.
I just had one contentious point.
Did you build the road that you drove on?
Sorry?
Did you build the road that you drove on? Okay.
But I just wanted to put one point out. Okay, I am of the strong opinion that India will have the last laugh as far as at least our race to China is concerned, because China is state-driven and India-Africa relationships are private sector-driven, and our entrepreneurs take time to take a decision. But once it's done, the relationship is built and it's for the long term. So I think India eventually will be the final one prevailing on the continent.
Okay. I'm going to come back to you at the end for India-China comparison, but for the moment I think we'll open it up. So I'll go with the lady there in the middle first, then right at the back. Please introduce yourself if you would.
Hello, my name is Chaturvedi and I'm from ORF. And it's been a pleasure to listen to all the speakers, but I definitely do not agree with Ambuj. My PhD was actually on the role of China in Sub-Saharan Africa, and I'm very happy to hear a few of the other speakers who mentioned that Indian exports to Africa are sort of, we've not really exploited the potential, and my opinion is that India faces a lot of competition from China there. To give you a very small example, I studied Ethiopia. China actually accounts for over 70% of Ethiopian footwear imports. So I mean, that is the level of penetration that China has made into the African market. And we are definitely much, much behind them when it comes to other manufactured goods, apart from the ones that two of the other speakers have mentioned, refined petroleum and pharmaceuticals and vehicles. Another point that I wish to mention was regarding the agricultural cooperation which was made by the first speaker. It is again a very, very important for India and Africa to collaborate on agriculture. But I think we need to bring in sustainability and agriculture together, because I agree that Africa has a lot of land, but also we need to keep in mind issues of relocating the traditional people. We need to keep in mind environmental degradation, all that together. Thank you.
Gentleman in the back there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To panelists, to protocols observed. My name is Chipa Wong. I'm a PhD research scholar at Shara University. First of all, I want to, as a information, to share a recent panel discussion that was chaired by World Bank President this week. The theme of that panel is eradicating poverty from Africa. So there were panelists. The president of Congo chaired, made the key presentation. World Bank president was there. President of African Development Bank was there. 4 key things arose from that panel. I participated. It was online for almost 2 hours. And the bone of contention there is, like, if I'm to quote the president of African Development Bank, he said that he bought a chocolate in Europe, and that chocolate, the manufacturers wrote manufactured since 18 something. And what he said, Africa has been making mistakes since 18 something. That the cocoa that was cultivated in Ghana or in Nigeria had been going to Europe only to come back to Africa. So that was the key thing, how to add value. Like Musa said that Africa is resource-based. They stamp their foot on that. So if India is going to partner with Africa, you'll be thinking on how to add value on the rich resource of Africa. That panel discussion was held this week. Then, especially also, I'm also of the view the PIDA program that was contributed. Those are the areas that how to add value on the resource-rich Africa. So then also motor vehicles and the technology transfer. I'm in the university. In one of my studies, almost all the universities don't have technology transfer units. And I would say, like, somebody took me to a car shop in India. They said they want to buy a car. I love it. Good. I said, can you take me to Nigeria? No. No. I said, what? You have a product you don't want to sell. What's the problem? And that's the area the Indian government, thank God for the revolutionary vision of the present government. The reverse is the case. If you go to China, they want to take things out from their country and foreign exchange. So those are the areas that I want to share.
Would you perhaps get to your question, because we have a number of other people.
Okay, thank you.
Gentleman from DFI.
Yes, so I'm Sudip from DFID, and I manage the CETA. I think, so this is an example of a tangible project, and it's about value added. So everything we do has to have some value addition within your inputs. And it has been mentioned here just now and earlier that there's a problem here with value added creation in Africa. It has been diagnosed for a while now. What I think would be useful is to remind ourselves that most of the exports from Africa to India are in extractives, in natural resources, from a very few countries. If you tax that out, exports from Africa to India are very small, and extremely small from the least developed countries in Africa. So it's great that Africa and India are trading more. I mean, we all welcome that. But the picture is actually very much, in fact, I've seen some research which suggests that African trade with emerging powers like India, China, mainly India, China, and a little bit Brazil, is exacerbating the African dependency on commodity exports. So I just want to kind of bring that forward. And so the example of farmer would be, for example, something, and we move from perhaps Indian cooperation could try and focus on specific value chains where India has clear is competitive globally. And so I was very heartened to hear the example of pharma, where I think there is a low-hanging fruit here can we do more with Indian inputs, both for import substitution, which is a dirty word, but I shall still use it, import substitution of things that could be produced, we know that could be produced in Africa, and create jobs in Africa, and I think pharma will be one. The automotive industry of India is not globally competitive, but it is certainly an area where there could be technology transfer from India to Africa, because it is, we have to compare African technological know-how with Indian technological know-how. And so why are we working on India and Africa? Because India is an emerging dynamic economy in a way that most African countries, let's face it, are not. And so there is actually, this is a disparity where we can tap into and do the technology transfer in a number of tangible value chains. And the private sector should be in the lead, because development cooperation of India is still very nascent. And we don't even have, I think we don't have the DPA today here on what is very much a very tangible discussion, and we don't have the DPA, and the DPA can learn from all of this, but we don't have the DPA sitting here to my knowledge. So I just wanted to say it will be, I think there's real potential, but we need to move to value chains, I think. We need to pull it down to value chain. Why is India not establishing special economic zones in Africa? In East Africa, they're doing it in Vietnam, because they can export to the United States and Europe via the preferential access that Vietnam has. So there's a huge potential, but let's start with a couple of concrete value chains, come together, private sector led, and let's make it happen in 1-2 countries, and then, then we take it from there, and then we can, and that can be on the next 5 years. And it's, I think the know-how is here, but we have just, I think there's a coordination problem, and there is a coordination failure problem, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions in this round? We can go through here. We've got 3 hands. Yeah, let me start with you. Just here to the left. And could I request all of you to keep your comments or questions brief, because we are now coming to the end of the session.
Yeah, basically, I want to ask you.
Would you introduce yourself? I know you've done a morning work.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Mukhtar, and right now I will be basically speaking on the experience of Indian agriculture consulting group. So let's say they have we launched the IIM-Calcutta partnership on June 24, 2013, in collaboration with Indian Council of Agricultural Relations and IIM-Calcutta. So I want to basically, because I was very trying to understand the kind of opportunities which are being opened at the discussions, and especially Sudip, Chaudhuri, you mentioned, like especially how to connect the users to the firms here. So we are primarily focusing on especially how to connect the large expertise which we have in the field of agriculture, horticulture, and also recently growing field of food processing. And then, so how to generate success stories in Africa using this expertise. So in this regard, of course, I'm happy to just share that that we made some initial beginnings. We don't do investments here. Of course, we had some small projects coming up that we had some big response to that. But of course, as you mentioned that this is one of the institutional forums which we have created. It's of course it's a private initiative, and I think there are other ICR institutions which are also doing it, like I think they have specific mandates. But then, of course, I wanted to just mention about this Indian agriculture consulting group, which has been established, and maybe. But then, of course, we wanted to do some more.
If you don't mind, I'd like to pass on. So, do you have a specific question, or?
No, I wanted to just ask this, that what additional things will you have in mind?
Thank you. In the back, and again, I request you to be brief.
Okay. My name is Sudip. I am a research scholar from Chaturvedi University. I am Nigerian. So my own is, a lot of things has been discussed, potentials, Africa and India. But the question is fundamental now. Why is Indian-African partnership? Because that is the basic question we need to ask all ourselves. to me is sustainable development for the two continents. How? Basically, you know, there are various areas where requires a lot of investment and technology transfer from Africa, as mentioned by various people here. For example, in the manufacturing sector in Africa, there are a lot of opportunities, more particularly when Indian businessmen and women could be able to adopt open innovation framework, because that is the basic. Since some are operating, some have defects in terms of technology, some have defects in terms of even material supply, some have defects in terms of investment. So if the Indian business people will be able to tap those opportunities by jointly developing various companies, various ventures in Africa, based on partnership, real partnership in open innovation framework, I believe that will help immensely in this Indian-African partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Radula, that will be the last one, and I'll give the panelists a chance for the first one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been reading this question from the first session where Professor WPS was chairing, from geostrategy to geoeconomics, etc. It has lowered that. I thought this was the economic session, and my question will be more relevant. The question is very simple. India had, among with other countries, taken lead in forming this Indian Ocean Association for Regional Cooperation, Indian Ocean RIP, IOR, as it may have a new name now. I want to know from panelists here, what is their assessment of its working and what is its future? And if there is anything to revive it, to bring it to some, revitalize it for common benefit of both Africa and India, and the India-African partnership as a role model, as a starting point, then to extend to the rest of the continent. Thank you.
So I'm going to start with you, Sudip. We'll go in sequence right to left. And there were a couple of specific issues that pertain to your emphasis on technology. So first one, but feel free to address anything and briefly, maybe a minute or so.
Yeah, I really appreciate, friend from DFI, what you said. See, one thing, this is intercession is trade investment. One thing should be clear that India can export more or trade can go up, but that is not necessarily a good idea for Africa. For example, in pharmaceuticals of which I am focusing on, India is a exporter. And now the major problem in Africa is how to actually reduce the dependence of Africa on India. In fact, very frankly, let us face that if Africa pharma is to develop, then that in some respects that would be actually have a negative impact on Indian pharma industry. And therefore the issue is, that and therefore we want to clear about what we have in mind, how we should proceed. In fact, if you ask me what is the most important reason why we developed technology in India, it was because of their investment in collaboration with USSR. And that was not a private initiative. That was more a political, government-to-government initiative. So I think, that if really, if India is Africa and India, and I would believe, and I am saying that in some respect, India will have taken leadership. I think in pharma, India is more developed. Therefore India will have taken leadership, which can help Africa. And there are surely other areas that I think we can learn from Africa. And therefore, what I think it should be done, and that is what perhaps in first seminars and other things we should discuss. I think the gentleman who had mentioned about agriculture from institutions, more details would be actually relevant. That coming back, my assessment is that if the Indian firms, it is similar to in the 1950s in India. These are multinationals. Multinationals did not come to India. They were treated India as an export destination. Today, I think most Indian firms treat Africa as an export destination. As of now, they are not interested in investing there. If the Indian firms want to actually replace their exports to Africa by production in Africa, the pharma industry will totally change, but that is unlikely. And therefore, what I believe is, the readiness of such seminars where you need other interventions, so that the processes we have that can be used for Africa. And I think very frankly, that is something which is there.
Thank you. Sani, you had two interventions from your compatriots. advocates would like to address those or because of the resolution?
No, let me say, okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. There was a question on this comparison between China and India. I'm really very, very uncomfortable with this because there is distinct China and there is distinct India. And our relationships as Africans to these two are totally and completely not in terms of competition or any comparison. Now, the basis of our relationship with India is completely different and the framework is completely different from that of China. We know that we share a lot of things in common. Now we are speaking, all of us are speaking English. Can we do that in Beijing? You have to get an interpreter. Am I right or wrong? Good. So, basic democratic tenets we share with India because every African country is now trying to be democratic. The current Freedom House report says 22 of the 54 countries of Africa are really democratic. Of course, in Nigeria, this is the first time this year that an opposition party was able to defeat a ruling party, which means our democracy is deepening and getting more entrenched. So there are certain basic freedoms that we share, and there are certain basic values, norms, and standards that we share with India. Secondly, as Indians, there are certain things that you cannot go below because this is a society of rule of law, this is a society that is of international standard, this is a society. You cannot say the same thing for the others or the other side that you are comparing. So I don't want a situation where, now, every relationship, we have India, Africa, we have Franco-African relations, we have even Singapore this year, almost 7 million people are calling the rest of the continent to come on. So basically we answer everyone, but the first thing we try to do is to know the motive. Now if you look at China and its situation, you know that there are certain things that they want from us. One of which is this. China has about 20% of the global population, but 9% of the total land mass of the world. So there is land GDP deficit. You cannot expect them not to be looking for land, and you cannot expect us to keep quiet and wait because land is one thing that is always finite. The problem in the Middle East is about land, basically. So there are other developing countries that have the same land GDP deficit. For example, Egypt in Africa, Bangladesh here in Asia. These are countries that have very large population that their land cannot sustain them. Now, I was in US on a course in 2010, and one of the things that was mentioned in the State Department to me, which I kept it in my mind, is that China has a strategic plan of exporting or transferring about 300 million Chinese to Africa by 2050. I'm looking at it, and I'm just reading something by Howard French about China-Africa relationship. The book is still with me, I'm just on chapter 2. I came with it. So you look at every relationship within its own motive, within its own meaning, within its own implication. How does it apply to a given situation? Please don't compare India to China. Our relationship with India is completely different from what we have with China or any other country in the world. US or Western powers, we know the relationship we have with them. So thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
Any responses?
Actually, I would just echo Mr. Sani because that was the point I was going to make on democracy and cooperation between India and Africa. So while China has an edge over infrastructure and roads,
The future is that the difference.
No, sorry about preempting the India-China question. I don't know, but just to my friend from ORF, sorry I didn't get your name. I think it's too early to take a call on India-Africa relationship for the simple reason this is the first ever summit where all the heads of state are coming. The scale. I think you should use this summit as a benchmark for India-Africa relations, not what's happened in the last 10 years. So I think we'll leave it at that. We won't feud anything further.
If you have a view on the Indian Ocean Rim initiative and past failure of the process. Of course, if you answer any other questions, that was one.
I'll answer another question and go to the Indian Ocean Rim question. One is this India-China. I think it's a wrong topic to debate completely. The way of working of the two countries is different. And India doesn't have an India in capitals. If it's a private sector, then Mr. Ambuj Chaturvedi goes and he makes money or uses money. And his neck gets cut or he gets no one else. So an Indian company, if it goes with the program, it's an Indian company going. It doesn't matter whether he's going to put up a project in Dwarka in Gujarat, or whether he's going to put up a project in Salem in Tamil Nadu, or in Chhattisgarh, or in Nairobi, or in Kampala, or where else. Where he can do well, where he can make money, where it makes sense to invest. Indian engagement in Africa is being set up on that basis. And any Indian company going there or any Indian entrepreneur going there is going with that logic in his mind and with his objective. When a person or a company or organization goes with that, then a company does not go, hundreds of people don't go, 50 people, 70 people, 80 people don't go, 2 or 3 people go, and they try to set up something. And when they try to set up something, the people they use are the local people whom they try to if they are good enough. If it is not good enough, we can't do the project. He is not dependent on a support system which is outside him and his father or his uncle or his brother. And he succeeds because of his father or uncle or brother and the people in the country which he is working. He's got good employees there, he can get a good production system running, he does well. And number of those people who are born and started doing well is increasing, and the tempo is going up. In terms of value, if you see, it may not look very exciting, but if you put up an oil well, it costs you X $100 million, and it's an FDI of $100 million. If you put up a steel plant, steel rolling mill, it costs you about some odd crore of rupees, and it costs an FDI of that many crore of rupees. But it requires about 40 or 50 or 60 or 80 people who will get trained and who will get insulin, that thing will spread. That perception difference between India and China will be there. India cannot match up to China in scale, India cannot match up to China in efficiency, India cannot match up to China in determination. Indian determination, Indian efficiency, Indian this thing will depend on Mr. XYZ of Rajkot or Ludhiana or thing, and each will be different. Some will succeed, some will fail. So there is no point having India-China comparison, and there is no point thinking about whether it is in national interest or not in national interest for a pharma in India to invest in Africa or not invest in Africa. If a company finds it profitable and viable, they will invest, and we have financed companies as a bank who have invested in Africa if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, they will not invest. So these things are there, and the pilot project we are doing is to create an ambience where people can think it profitable or viable to invest in those places. Just as like we should have projects for people to invest in Bihar or Jharkhand and Odisha and other places, the equal amount of attention should be given for it. As far as the Indian Ocean Rim project is concerned, see, this is a thing which has been created as a concept, and it's a very good concept from the strategy point of view. But if you see the engagement between the countries, if you see the Indian-Mauritius engagement is growing very well. Whether any of the individuals who are partnering with each other in India, Mauritius or Indian Seychelles are aware of this Indian Ocean Rim, I do not know. Because as EXIM Bank and as SBI, they have a lot of business operations in Mauritius and in Seychelles and other ocean rim projects, but I don't think it was in our conscious knowledge that we are, and it is not as a banker or as a individual person who's doing in trade, these thought processes don't come in. These strategies and these thought processes comes in academics and maybe at times it makes sense, but at times I don't think it makes sense. People get captured by phrases and mega things but Indian involvement in Mauritius is growing. Indian involvement in Seychelles is growing. And Indian involvement in Malay and other things is growing. In Malay, in fact, at that one point of time when I was in State Bank of India, loans to Malay, established Malay were more than the GDP of Malay. All the island resorts were financed by, they were by Indian companies there and setting it up for tourists. So that all that is there. But whether it's a part of Indian Ocean, these are strategic concepts. The strategic concepts, I think, is very you are better off, but I'm not.
So, basic answer to those questions is that unless you have a foundation of pull economic relationships,
pull factor should be discussed separately from strategy. See, that's a push factor. And if you go by push factors, it will never work.
Okay. So I'm going to bring this to a close. We're about 3 or 4 minutes outside our schedule. I don't intend to summarize. It's been a very rich discussion. I think we've, as the gentleman said, we keep talking about opportunity, and we did a lot of that. But in the process, we also, I think, came up with some very concrete both constraints to doing business. And I think the foremost of amongst those was our, let's say, our unwillingness or inability to understand the truly heterogeneous nature of the continent. I mean, we tend to think of Africa, India as a bilateral relationship, and it's clearly not. But at the same time, as Ambuj was saying, it is possible to evolve from a country-based strategy to a regional strategy, and I think Sani's point about groups as the building block, perhaps common shared legacy, shared histories, as something that could provide you that stepping stone. And Sudip is emphasizing the need for specific institutions which allow for the transfer of knowledge in some form. So this is opportunity plus some zeroing in on possible mechanisms for increasing the interface. So thank you all very much for sharing your thoughts. That was extremely stimulating session. Thank you all for participating.